The sea was calm, too calm. A deceptive stillness that every seasoned fisherman learns to fear. Thomas Grady, 42, steered his aging boat through the vast stretch of the Atlantic, 135 miles off the coast of Florida. Dawn had long since passed, but the day had brought him nothing but sunburn and silence. He was just about to change course and head back when something in the water caught his eye. A movement, flat, erratic. A fin? Driftwood? He grabbed his binoculars, and his throat tightened. It was a dog, a German shepherd, alone, in the open ocean. No boat in sight, no land anywhere, no life vest, no collar. Just this exhausted animal, paddling with the last of its strength against the waves. Thomas's heart pounded. "What the hell are you doing out here?" he muttered, firing up the engine and steering straight toward the animal. The dog was struggling, its head bobbing with each wave, jaws snapping for air. A few more minutes and it would go under. Thomas cut the engine, threw off his shirt, and climbed over the railing. Cold salt water slapped his face as he fought his way through the swells, eyes locked on the animal. The dog had no strength left. He was almost gone by the time Thomas reached him. The body was heavy, the soaked fur dragging like an anchor. "I got you, buddy," he gasped, pulling the limp body to him and swimming back to the boat. With every ounce of strength, he hoisted the dog to the rope ladder, where it instinctively climbed up, only to collapse on the deck. Thomas followed, completely out of breath. Water streamed from his face as he knelt beside the dog. The fur was crusted with salt, paws raw, breath shallow. But he was alive. "You're a miracle," Thomas whispered. He wrapped him in a tarp and dribbled fresh water onto his parched lips. The shepherd didn't move, but in his amber eyes there was something. Not shock, not fear. Only a calm, unbreakable will to survive. 2 hours later, as the boat headed toward the nearest marina, the dog still lay motionless on deck. No collar, no chip, no explanation. Just rough skin on his paws, as if he'd been swimming for hours. But how had he gotten here? 135 miles from shore. Thomas looked out to the horizon, then back at the dog. "What the hell did you see out there?" he whispered. The sun had long since set by the time Thomas arrived at his small coastal cabin, carrying the completely exhausted German shepherd. The shutters creaked in the wind, and the wooden porch was weathered from salt. But for tonight, it was a safe place. Gently, Thomas laid the dog on a folded blanket by the fireplace. He placed a bowl of fresh water beside him, along with some cooked chicken. But the dog didn't move. His chest rose and fell barely perceptibly. He was alive, but the price had been steep. "You should be dead," Thomas whispered, sitting down beside him, still soaked from the salt water. "But you didn't give up. Not once." His hand stroked the matted fur, hardened and stiff from the sea. The dog blinked, just once. The next morning, Thomas was awakened by the soft scratch of claws on wood. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. But then he saw him, the shepherd, unsteady, limping, but standing. He slowly walked through the room, sniffed the walls, surveying the cabin. No whining, no wagging tail, just calm, control. Thomas stepped closer. "You're not just any dog," he murmured. And the more he watched, the more certain he became. Every step the dog took was deliberate. No panic, no flinching at sounds, no barking. Just alert, composed eyes that seemed to analyze everything. When Thomas set down a plate of cooked chicken, the dog sniffed it carefully, then began to eat. Slowly, intentionally, like he had been trained. A strange feeling crept up in Thomas. He had once served as a Navy rescue diver, and he had seen dogs like this before. Military trained. But how had a dog like that ended up 135 miles out in open water? At the animal clinic, his suspicion was confirmed. The vet found no chip, no collar, nothing, except a small rusty metal tag hidden deep in the fur. The engraving was nearly illegible. Only a single letter remained visible, R. "That's all we've got," the vet said. "No name, no code, just R." Ranger, thought Thomas. The name came to him instantly, and it fit. Not just because of the letter, but because this dog was a fighter, a survivor. That night, as rain lashed the roof, Thomas sat beside the dog, now named Ranger, and spoke quietly. "Whatever it was you saw out there, you're safe now, and I swear I'm going to find out what happened to you." Ranger blinked, then rested his head on Thomas's knee. Not from exhaustion, but from trust. 2 days later, Ranger was barely recognizable. He ate regularly, followed Thomas around the cabin, and rested his head on Thomas's lap when he thought no one was watching. And yet, something remained. An invisible shadow behind his eyes. Something that refused to be forgotten. It was a sound that changed everything. The distant, barely audible hum of a helicopter over the coast. Ranger froze. His body tensed, ears flattened, and his eyes, those intelligent, alert eyes, turned blank. As if a switch had been flipped inside him, Thomas saw it, felt it, and he understood. This was no ordinary dog, and whatever triggered that reaction was buried deep in Ranger's past. That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He dug out an old dusty laptop left over from his time as a Navy dive commander. Through a secure connection, he accessed retired military databases. He knew it was risky, but he needed answers. He typed in R7, German Shepherd, no tag, tactical training, East Coast operations. Then, something popped up. Access denied. He tried again, this time using an outdated bypass code from his active service days. The screen flickered. Operation Nightmark, Class Red, Animal Recon Unit. Status, terminated. Last contact, 3 days before recovery, marked as lost asset. Mission, offshore, deactivation authorized. Thomas froze. They had written him off. Ranger, as if he was nothing more than a tool, a machine. And worse, they had tried to destroy him. Behind him, something rustled. Ranger stood in the doorway, his eyes locked on the screen. No whine, no growl, just a silent acknowledgement. He knew. He remembered. Then, the humming again, louder now, deeper. Thomas pulled back the curtain. A black SUV had stopped at the edge of his property. 2 men in plain clothes stepped out, one holding a small tracking device. They had found him. "Ranger, let's go," Thomas whispered. He grabbed his backpack, tossed a blanket onto the truck's passenger seat. Ranger jumped in, silent as a shadow. No barking, no panic, just pure, focused tension. They drove into the night, into the woods, miles away where the road ended and only forgotten diver paths remained. Thomas parked between 2 trees. Silence pressed in from all sides. In the darkness, they sat side by side as Ranger quietly sniffed the air, mapping the terrain like a soldier in foreign land. Thomas looked at him. "What are you, boy? What did they do to you?" No answer, just a quiet stare. And then, Ranger lifted his paw, placed it gently on Thomas's knee. Not a command, not a reflex, but a message. "I trust you." The sun had barely risen when Thomas and Ranger left the coast in a small boat. They sailed out toward a remote bay, a hidden spot Thomas had once used for covert diving missions. Surrounded by jagged cliffs and thick underbrush, it was a place to disappear, at least for a little while. Thomas had seen the look on Ranger's face when he read the military file. Something had shattered, but something else had awakened. This wasn't an ordinary dog. He had been trained for something dangerous and then betrayed. Suddenly, a faint, ominous thrum of a helicopter. Then, a shadow over the water. Ranger lifted his head instantly, his body tensed. Seconds later, he dove below deck. Thomas followed his gaze, and there it was, the helicopter, black, unmarked. 5 men stepped out, clad in dark uniforms. One of them, helmetless, with a weathered face and ice-cold eyes, raised a small device. He pressed a button. A high-pitched tone, barely audible to humans, but Ranger yelped in agony, dropped to the floor, trembling. The control. A hidden command. "What the hell are you doing to him?" Thomas yelled. The man looked up. "He's not yours. R7 belongs to us. Recovery authorized. Extraction in progress." "He's not a thing," Thomas shouted back. But 2 of the men were already moving toward the boat, weapons drawn. Ranger shook, not out of fear, but because of the war inside him. The tone hurt. The old commands clawed at him, but Thomas's voice anchored him. Then, a howl. Ranger leapt from the boat. He charged across the rocks, straight at the men. They tried to stop him, too late. Ranger was a storm, a shadow of rage, a survivor. Thomas ran after him. In seconds, all was chaos. Shouts, gunfire, and then silence. When Thomas reached him, Ranger stood over one of the men. His gaze locked onto the officer. The man raised his hands. "Fall back. Now." Without a word, they retreated. The helicopter lifted into the sky. Only the wind remained, and Ranger, who slowly trotted back to Thomas, his eyes clear, free. Later that evening, as the golden sun dipped over the shoreline, they sat again in front of the cabin. Thomas placed a new collar around Ranger's neck. Real leather, stamped in gold. Just one word, Ranger. That's your name, not a code, not a command, just you. The dog rested his head on Thomas's leg and closed his eyes. For the first time, not from exhaustion, but from peace. What part of Ranger's story moved you the most? Tell us in the comments below. We read every single one. If you believe in second chances, if you know that loyalty has no words, if you love dogs with all your heart, then like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who believes that animals can save us too. Because sometimes it's not the human who rescues the dog, but the dog who saves the human.